Lisa,
Yes, baby girl.
when I grow up, I want to be a woman to society.
Then so shall you be. Hello, everybody. This is Lisa Landry. Welcome back to A Menace to Society. I have the privilege today of speaking to a producer who's making quite an impact with the BBC. She's a freelancer who just put out a new project, Nepal Fights Foreign Pedophiles. Please welcome to the podcast, Caroline Finnigan.
Hello.
Hello. You made a lovely, lovely piece letting people know about the child abuse happening. These children are being exploited by Westerners who are visiting Nepal, yeah?
Yes, these are Western men who are targeting Nepal. Nepal is a very easy country to enter. You can come in on a tourist visa, you can get a tourist visa at the airport. And it's a poor country. It's open to Western paedophile men, usually always men, who come in looking to have illegal sex with underage children. And this program focused explicitly on men who are looking for young boys to exploit and abuse. And also the work of the Nepalese paedophile unit, headed up by an incredible policeman called Kabit Katawal, very charismatic, very bright, very capable man who has managed to secure a number of arrests and convictions in the last couple of years, which is why, in a way, the media attention has been focusing on Nepal a bit and on this story, because he's been arresting and convicting European and North American paedophiles, more than a dozen. Now, this has been going on for some time, but his arrests has made the media turn around and look at what's happening and kind of put the focus on what's happening, because we aren't the first media organisation to look at this story. Al Jazeera's already done a piece about it. It's been dribs and drabs in the Western media. But I think what we did was show how it all joins up, how they use the web, how they come in on tourist visas, how they groom local children, sometimes through people that the children know, sometimes through the children's own relatives, and how it's all bound up also with making money. So it's quite a complex, dark picture.
Yeah, it's exceedingly dark. It's really troubling to know that these young boys are being victimized so egregiously, and not only are they suffering physically in the moment and the repercussions thereafter, but these videos are now being put out online, so the child's being victimized in perpetuity.
Exactly. And that's what we found out, because on our first interview that we did with Kabit Katawal, he described how children were drugged, and he made a motion with his hand and showed, the injecting motion. And we said, what? And he said, yes, what the paedophiles do is they lure them into the hotel room or the apartment or whatever that they've rented. And sometimes they're drugged, and the children speak of waking up and not really knowing what was going on. And apparently what happens is the children are abused and also photographed and filmed, and those images are uploaded on the dark web. And then through another set of people we talked to, we understood that these people then use the dark web to show kind of teaser images and say, if you want to see more, subscribe to this website and pay and you'll see more. And the money they've used to groom these children initially, they get back by selling the images online. So it's almost like not to use the right phrase, but it is a perfect circle for them. It's not a perfect circle for the people who are abused and the parents of those children, the relatives of those children, let alone what it does in Nepalese society.
Right, because it's a very, I don't want to say shy society, but these aren't things that people talk about. Even in the West, people don't like talking about these topics of children being groomed and abused and exploited and raped. So in that culture, it's even more taboo to speak on, yeah?
You're exactly right. And one of the things that we looked at in the documentary was further down the line, when the children are older, what happens to them. And obviously gaining access to child victims is very difficult. Obviously, we could not identify the child that we spoke to. We had to be very, very careful because the children are underage, and there are BBC guidelines that restrict what you can and can't do and how you go about it. But we spoke to older adults, post 18, 19, 20-year-old young men who had been abused by their relatives and who could talk about what the impact was on them. And one young man said that his grades suffered, his confidence suffered, he couldn't talk to his family about what had happened to him. It was his uncle, and his uncle had moved on and got married and raised a family, and he was left almost in limbo, trying to pick up the pieces of his life. And he spoke very eloquently and very movingly about what it meant to him. And also Jill asked him, if you could speak to your younger self, what would you say to your younger self? And he said, I would tell my younger self, that boy, to go and talk to my mother. Go and talk to your mother. Tell them what happened. Tell your parents what happened to you. Don't hide it. Don't keep it suppressed. And I thought that was very wise advice and very difficult, particularly in cultures where, as was described to us, male on male sex almost doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. It does, of course, but it's not acknowledged and it's not openly talked about. It's a very problematic area, yes.
I do want to say I loved your piece. I think it's a beautiful program that you've made, and I urge people to watch it. We're going to put a link. It is Nepal Fights Foreign Pedophiles, produced by our guest this week, Caroline Finnigan. And I did notice that you had that gentleman that you're speaking of, and he did give sage advice. It was beautifully done. And I also was very taken by the fact that you interviewed some of the pedophiles who are currently serving time in Nepal.
Yeah. One of the things that we were told we couldn't do, or would be inadvisable to do, and it's true, it is legally problematic, is to go into active cases. In other words, try and contact men or delve into cases that had not yet resulted in any kind of prosecution or acquittal. So anything that was active and ongoing, we stayed away from for legal reasons, and that's absolutely the right thing to do. But what we did do, we got official permission to go and visit 2 or 3 prisons, and once we arrived at the prison, we asked formal permission with our letters of entry to speak to convicted paedophiles. The first jail we went to, we were told, no way, go away. The second one we went to, we were sitting in a waiting room, and we basically said, do you have any Western men who've been convicted of acts of paedophilia, rape, or sexual abuse, etc., who are convicted and serving jail sentences? This was a much smaller jail, and we weren't quite sure who was there. We were just sitting there, and then these 2 gentlemen arrived. Obviously, we were told we could talk to them, not record the conversation for radio, audio only. We couldn't do that, but we could take notes, and we couldn't identify the men concerned. So both Jill McGivering, who was the BBC reporter involved, and me, as the producer, took notes as they described their cases, what happened to them. They professed their innocence, absolutely adamant they were innocent, they were appealing. They said it was all about money, that they could have money extorted from them. One gentleman had said that he'd been in Asia for a long time, never had any trouble before, anywhere he'd lived. This was the first time he'd been accused of such crimes. And we took notes. So we had nothing. So we recorded what is in the journalistic world called a stand-upper, which is Jill describing on location the prison and what had happened, and then got actors to voice up the scripts that we wrote based on the notes. It sounds incredibly convoluted. It was the only way we could do it. So we had
It sounds incredibly creative, actually, if you ask me. I think it was very well done, and I appreciate it.
It was tricky because you have to realise that we had to be accurate as well. We couldn't just kind of throw our notes up in the air and as they fell say, oh, that was a good sentence. Ooh. We actually had to be truthful and accurate to what we both heard. And what is interesting is that when you have two people taking notes, sometimes you're listening and not writing, and sometimes you're writing and listening, and there were little gaps, and where there were gaps, each one of us had filled in for the other, almost like automatically. So there were a couple of big gaps where Jill was just listening and not writing notes, but I was feverishly writing notes. We did have a pretty complete picture of that discussion with those two men, who were quite happy that we were talking to them and knew that we were taking notes and making a radio documentary. It was all very open. And the prison jailer was there listening. He could speak English, and he was listening to the conversation as well. So it was all above board. We couldn't go in under any false pretenses. We were very clear of who we were and what we were doing. Of course we were.
Of course.
So what you got was what they wanted to tell us as representatives of the BBC. It was very interesting. And you expect, oh, weren't you angry? You know, the sorts of questions people ask you, what did you think of these people? And to be honest, I didn't feel anything. I just looked at them and thought, you are a convicted paedophile. You're here in Nepal serving a sentence, and I'm here as a journalist listening to what you have to say. My own personal feelings, or Jill's personal feelings, they were put to one side. We were just professionals there to hear their story, like with any other interview. And I know that may sound strange to some people, but it's what you have to do as professionals.
Well, you have to detach to get the story, right?
Yes, and it's nothing to do with us. We are not, we're not the people who are affected by this. We're not members of the family of the children who were abused. We are journalists trying to find out what is going on. We were very pleased that we got a reasonably complete picture of what goes on.
It was extremely complete. Again, I urge anybody to please do listen to this. Watch it if you can. We're going to put the link up so that people can access this fantastic piece that you produced, Caroline Finnigan, for the BBC. What is it like? I know that, of course, you're professional, you're detached, you're going in to get the story. What's it like, though, when you wrap a project like this and you walk away from it?
Oh, it's an interesting question. That is an interesting question. With this project, we've been getting a lot of feedback from people saying, oh my God, we never realized it was as bad as that. And also, what role the internet has to play in all of this, and how much the internet is a force for good and a force for evil. And how on earth do you deal with that? And it raises questions, and the questions I can't answer. And it has the programs like this. Jill and I work on projects that are very difficult, that cover very difficult, very problematic, sometimes dangerous subjects, sometimes quite emotionally charged subjects. And these programs have an afterlife. And the program editor had a conversation with Jill yesterday, actually, when Jill was approaching her about something else. And she said, I can't get this program out of my mind. It was extraordinarily powerful, and some programs just get under your skin. And I think this program is one of those. I would never say that I enjoyed making this program. I would never say it's an enjoyable listen. It's not. But I would say that I'm glad I covered the subject. I'm glad it's out there. And once it's out there, to answer your question directly, once your programs are out there, they belong to the people who listen. They don't belong to me and Jill anymore. They belong to the people who are listening, reading, watching that stuff, because that's why you do it. And you hope in some tiny, tiny, tiny way they help illuminate difficult problems. And that's a very public broadcasting way of thinking about things, but I'm afraid I'm of that tradition, and I do believe sincerely that we do a good job.
I think you did a great job. I think this is a fantastic, fantastic piece, and I thank you for making it for me and the rest of the public.
Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you very much, and best of luck, Caroline Finnigan.
All the best.
Thanks again for speaking with my listeners and me, Caroline Finnigan. Y'all, please do check out Caroline's work. She's got that great piece with Jill McGivering. She produced it for the BBC, and it's called Nepal Fights Foreign Pedophiles. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do so, you will know when each new podcast drops every Woman is Wednesday. I'm also on Twitter at Lisa Landry. Shout out Ari Bear. I love you, little sunshine. Always be nice to every kid you meet. You never know what's going on.